Hi, welcome back to the DM Theory Podcast. My name is Nate, I'm your Dungeon Master, and I'm half the host of this podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about adventure paths, improvising, how to handle failure, and 3-frame analysis of dungeon mastering. I hope that you find it helpful. Enjoy!
Something's coming.
An arrow flies from the air, almost hitting the tops.
49! You are fly!
I am Dungeon Master.
I tell the story, and you make choices in the story.
If I were Dungeon Master, I'd have it made.
Fireball! Where'd it go?
How am I supposed to know?
Oh, you're Dungeon Master, remember?
Oh, right. Let's see. What would Dungeon Master say? You will find it.
So with that, how do you then develop your stories? Like, give me a juxtaposition between getting a campaign book and running that campaign versus creating your own story within that universe.
So, first thing, getting a campaign book, an adventure path, and running that is a great way to DM.
Yeah.
I have done that a lot. I love it. It's part of why I've been able to do it for 20 years, is I've avoided burnout by running Pathfinder adventure paths. That's what I like to play, and they make what I thought were really good ones. I still think are really good ones. I don't know why I said it that way. They make really good ones, and running an adventure path, because it's being made by people who are very familiar with the hobby, running an adventure path that's published, the story is created, and it's like there are just missing pieces in it that the players need to step in and fill. And then they've usually created and designed the game in such a way that you can kind of easily slot certain type of characters into certain positions. There's also usually a reason for people to come together and work together. If players are making characters separately, they don't make characters that know one another. And so one of the problems in that first game is, how do I get y'all to work together? How do I get you to come together and become the Guardians of the Galaxy rather than just a bunch of strangers who are in a bar at the same time?
Yeah.
Adventure paths usually take that into account. Most of my career as a DM has been with Pathfinder or Starfinder. And my first time DMing a Pathfinder game was a campaign called Way of the Wicked, which was a third-party supplement. It was not an official adventure path, but it was about being villains. We're bad guys. And there even is a really hard problem there. How do I get you to work together? How do I get you to not just cut each other's throats as soon as you can, because that is in character for you? And it was like, well, the very first game is about a prison break, and you're all in the same cell, and you're all stuck, and you all need one another.
Yeah. You got there for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. But now we're all in the same place. Another example, I ran an adventure path called Attack of the Swarm for Starfinder. You tell the players in the beginning, hey, you're all in the military.
Yeah.
And that is one way that you can, set those expectations, things like that. And I said, okay, you're all in the military. And then the first game, they're like, hey, you're all on watch at this time. And then that's the time when the swarm attacks and everything goes crazy. And there was a space station that fell out of orbit and crashed into a city. And then they're behind enemy lines, and it's just them. So they have to work together, and they have to. And if you can get them through a couple games of doing that, and everyone still is coming to the game, then things are going to be smooth, really moving forward. And they will already be invested in working together as a team. Way of the Wicked, you did kind of the way to keep the story moving was all about ambition. So there was an element of encouraging the players to build ambitious characters, because that was how you kept them working together. But as long as you can find a reason for somebody in character to do something, the player will probably do it. If you just tell them, hey, I'll work together. And I've said that, I've done that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people need to be told, but that isn't their favorite way to do it. People prefer if their character and their character's personality is taken into account somehow as the game begins. We've gotten really far away from adventure paths. Okay, so back to adventure paths, because that I was talking, I guess, it is
that
relevant.
far away.
It is relevant because slotting characters into positions as a way to compromise between writing a story and improvising one. I have always been able with Adventure Paths to easily customize everything to fit a character's specific personality, the way the player wants it to be. It doesn't feel like a generic adventure that could be happening to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to make it about them. And then the huge advantage with the Adventure Path is that everything else is there for you already. The rules, the map, the beats of the story, even things that you might not think are really important, but like the treasure that a character is going to get, the distance that a hallway is. Those are the questions that players have and that the Adventure Path just gives to you right away. Creating your own campaign is so rewarding because then it is just yours. Especially I've created my own setting. At one point I ran campaigns in my own setting I've created, and that world is still so important to me because I got to explore these ideas and things that I had with other people. We all got to kind of go to this place together and experience it. And that is a very different thing as a DM, not in terms of what you're doing, really. You have to put more in because you have to design those monsters and you have to know how far it is down the hallway and you have to know how many pieces of gold are in that bag. It's not in the book. But then that's part of the beauty is you get to decide how many pieces of gold are in that bag. And if you feel like one of those pieces of gold, maybe it's evil and the devil can see you through it, then you can do that. You can,
Yeah.
and it's not that you can't do that in Adventure Path. It's just that since things are being presented to you, you usually don't stray too far from that path.
Right.
Playing a game in your own world also tends to be a lot more, DMs can be very stay on the path because they have their own idea about this world and their custom game and the story that they wrote, or it can be a lot more player driven because what the DM wants to do is introduce people to this and then explore that world. They don't really have a specific storyline in mind. They're more just interested in the setting. Going too far in either direction, is not good in most cases, because if there's no plot line, if there's no villain, then the players will get bored. But if they don't have the ability to decide what they're going to do, then they're also going to get bored. They'll get frustrated. They'll feel like they're missing that personal spark that their character has. That thing that makes it different from playing a video game for a player. That thing that makes it special is the personal connection that they get to have with the character. The more a DM builds the game around this group of people, the more opportunities those people have to make their own decision about who they are in this world, versus that having different kind of archetypes that your character winds up slotted into. Even for a player, that can be good because then it can be very clear what they should do and what they're good at and things like that. But a lot of people become interested in playing tabletop role-playing games because they feel like they don't have the opportunity to express themselves. And they would like to experiment with these ideas they have about being a different type of person. What's a hero? If you could change yourself, how would you? What do these bodies or these archetypes or these stories mean to you? Rather than you're going to be presented with someone else's story and then you can consume it.
Kind of getting back to just managing those types of games, when you've in both scenarios with a pre-generated campaign and with your own campaign, how do you as a DM appropriately improvise as the game is going on? How do you, because that's something that I've always struggled with, is like, I have to go, okay, well, let me think about this for a second. So how can you keep the game alive while you're coming up with those reasons or with those objectives or actions or results?
Great question. Big barrier for people as they come in is the fear of that they're going to get stage fright.
Yeah.
And they will. That happens to everybody. And part of the great thing about being the DM is because you're the leader of the situation, you can say, all right, 10-minute break. I need to crunch what just happened because, you just lit the building on fire or whatever.
Yeah.
A great way to prepare yourself for improvisation is rules. And I learned this from reading about Chuck Jones, the guy who made Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, had a list of rules for each character. Like Roadrunner never really acknowledges Coyote. Roadrunner doesn't ever consider Coyote a threat. Coyote doesn't talk. Coyote never actually catches Roadrunner. Coyote is always the one who causes his own accidents, things like that. And those rules are always consistent, even though the scenario changes. So if I am playing a game and we're in a scenario and there are characters there, like maybe they're talking to a king, I can set rules for the king that he always expects people to be deferent to him. If they aren't deferent to him, how does he react? And he'll always react that way. And players will surprise you still with their actions, but because you have rules about what type of person your character is, usually you have a select number of reactions that you already know that you can take. I usually recommend that to players too, who, when they're trying to figure out, how do I improvise with my character, I'll say, set a number of rules for them. Be like, oh, they always take an opportunity to have a cigarette. They really like this type of clothing. Little rules like that. And then as they come into situations, if they're presented with the things that are relevant to their rules, they don't need to figure out a completely original response. They already know the framework of how their character feels without needing to think about it. It's been prepared already. And then a similar situation, bouncing back to the DM, as my players create their rules, I am now able to better predict their behavior as players at the table and then change or make decisions about the story more accurately in ways that I think will be more impactful. Because now I can put them in situations where those rules will apply, put them in situations where those rules might force them to make hard choices because all of these things about these characters are already established.
Is that something that you would request of your players as the DM?
It's something I usually recommend to my players as a DM. And then it's something I will usually ask about later, which I do with everything. I think about DMing a lot. And so when I have players upcoming in a game, then I'm usually thinking about their characters probably more than they are.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to make sure I know how everything works and how it all fits together.
Yeah.
And so I try to get people to talk to me about their character. And then even if they don't explicitly set rules for their character, to try and get them to think about what their character likes or dislikes.
Okay, so in that vein, in my Starfinder, which is sort of a modified Starfinder homebrew type thing, we just had our session 0 last week and created characters. And we got this set of homework from the DM. And I want to get your thoughts on this. So-and-so is a fixer and has always done right by you as you joined the life of living on the edge. How do you know them and why do you trust them? What did you do before meeting them and working with the group? Develop a quick story involving another member of the team that you might tell at a bar or other social event. This one I like. Create a slang word and what does it mean? Use it in a sentence.
I love this.
What is a major fear that can cause you to falter, and what is a minor fear that can cause you to grumble about having to deal with it?
There you go. Rules right there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it. It is setting rules.
And also setting reasons for the characters to work together, as I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The DM is asking, don't just be strangers to one another. Please think about that. There's a specific system, basically. Dungeon World, I think, is the D&D version, where character creation includes specific questions like that, which are even specific to your class. If you're a warrior, then maybe you defended one of the other people in the party at some point. And so, yeah, I like the way your DM, the word homework. I don't know. I always, whenever I give something to my players, I always say, this isn't homework.
Yeah.
Because if they don't do it, then whatever, we'll figure it out.
So we're getting credits if we complete it.
Oh,
so
that's good. That's good.
It's not a punishment if you don't do it. It's a reward if you do.
Yeah, you give them DM points.
Yeah.
I don't know, in Starfinder there are hero points for players, which is not something I've ever played with, but which
Really?
you're supposed to, kind of reward certain types of
Yeah.
play that you like by
Well,
giving
that's
out hero points.
inspiration
Yeah.
in 5th edition, or in that Star Wars, in the Fantasy Flight role-playing game for Star Wars, they have force points, and you roll at the beginning of the session. There's a force die that you roll, and it tells you how many force points are dark side and how many are light side. And you have little tokens on the table, and you can use those. Like a player can take a light side point and make a decision and flip that over. So it's just like, well, it's a good thing I packed this rope in the bag, and you can use that. But then when it's a dark side point, the game master in that system can use it to screw the players over. But then that flips it back to a light side point.
I see. I like stuff like that a lot.
You said you haven't used it. Have you thought about how you might use a system like that?
I will be using it in my long-term campaign.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going to be really sticking to the rules and the setting in the way that I haven't before. A big part of that is because now we're using tabletop miniatures, which is not something that I as a DM have done before. I've been strictly theater of the mind. I draw a little map on a chalkboard or a whiteboard or something like that.
Well, let's talk about that difference
Yes.
a little bit between the theater of the mind and then actually using miniatures. As a DM, how would you go about making that decision, and why?
Yeah. How much money do you have?
And it always a good question.
Have enough money to pick between either a heroine or a miniature habit. Yeah, that is a great way to go. I just, especially towards the beginning, and this is partially my personality, I didn't want anybody telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And I was very into that. As the dungeon master, I'm allowed to completely pick and choose when it comes to the rules at the table. That's totally true. So theater of the mind style play is focusing on making things cinematic rather than focusing on making them tactical. Your players are going to be making decisions in terms of what happens next in a story. They'll be making decisions responding to you in a conversation. You tell them what's happening. They tell you how they respond. You tell them how you respond. That doesn't really leave an opening for people who want to do a lot of strategic thinking, because it's always going to be a little unclear where everyone is. The rules will always kind of get rolled over in favor of the rules will always get rolled over in favor of the story continuing. At least that's my experience with theater of the mind.
Okay.
You don't really want to get bogged down in
Counting squares.
Yes, where things are located. And it's hard for people to imagine and maintain a consistent spatial relationship between a bunch of imaginary things. So theater of the mind style play is wonderful because it is an opportunity for creativity and storytelling, which isn't held back or slowed down by counting squares,
Yeah.
by accounting for gameplay and every specific rule. Now that I'm trying to make the transition to the other side, which I'm doing partially because I've been doing theater of the mind style DMing for 20 years.
Yeah.
I want to do something different. Now I am more of a game designer than I was previously. Previously, I had to think about how to keep fights balanced, and it was game design because I was trying to think about how to make them fun, even if it's conversation. How do I make this fight fun and interesting and let you use your character's abilities? But now, whether you can move 5 squares or 6 squares on your turn could mean the difference between whether you can attack an enemy. And that could mean the difference in the whole fight. So I don't feel as comfortable being like, yeah, he's close enough for you to run up on him and slash him.
Have a little fudging.
And if I'm going to obey that rule, it exists within a framework of every other rule. And so I need to be more cautious, I think, at least now getting started with it, more cautious about sticking to the book so that things are fair for the players and fair for me, so that everybody's playing by the exact same rules, so that there is no confusion on the player's part are we all playing the same game?
Yeah. Well, then how do you deal with the inherent unfairness of bad dice and, where somebody, where in this scenario where you're playing with miniatures, you're by the book, you've got the rules, and somebody can't roll to save their life. How do you deal with that? How do you fudge that as a DM?
I have definitely been in situations, and it's easier in theater of the mind, where monsters have suddenly lost like 40 hit points because now is not a good time to kill these people.
Yeah.
A really good way to deal with it is to have an objective for the enemy other than just killing everyone. And so that makes it easier for there to be a failure, even on everybody's part, and for the story to continue going. You can have the total party kill, the TPK,
Yeah.
as they've described, happen accidentally because you thought at least one person would make a save and they didn't. And so everybody just died. Like, those are the moments where I will actually step out of the game and step out of the rules and talk to the players straight as people and say, all right, what do we want to do with this story? Because we could just back this up. We could just
rewind a little bit.
Yeah, we could just Deus Ex Machina, something comes in and saves you,
You've gotten yourself in a big pile and we should probably backtrack a little bit.
One of you develops time travel powers, rolls the whole thing backwards.
Yeah. So there's a lot of options to sort of fudge it. And even not necessarily in story, you don't have to sit there and go, well, how am I going to make this work in context? You can almost metagame.
Yeah. It's not all on you.
Yeah.
It's collaborative. That's the whole nature of this, is that it's collaborative. And part of that is that the dice are collaborating.
Yeah.
Or they are adding their randomness. And that's what makes the story interesting. It can be worthwhile to let those failures ride.
Yeah.
But it's always worth it to think about what they call failing forward, which is that the story needs to keep moving forward even if people can't roll. So if there's a locked door and you need to roll a 16 or higher to get it, nobody just wants to sit there and watch the rogue roll a d20 over and over and over again when their life sucks and they can only roll a 1.
Yeah.
In that situation, they get 2 or 3 rolls maybe before the noise that they're making causes one of the guards who is inside to open the door.
Okay.
And then the story is advancing because now the door is open. It's just advancing in the wrong direction than what they wanted because now they've been caught. So they failed, but they are still, the story is moving forward. That helps for a lot of reasons because every good story needs to have the characters fail at different points or else there's no drama. And you do want them to feel afraid and that their characters might die in a dangerous situation and things like that. But as a DM, if you've thought through what happens if they succeed and what happens if they fail, both of those sides of the situation, how does that story keep going no matter what? Then you will be ready for those. It also can just be kind of fun to have to ride with that. I had one game once where the premise of the game was that all the players were the children of a royal family that had been deposed. They were all half-elves. They were all siblings. And one of the characters was playing the eldest brother, a fighter, and he was the one who was supposed to go back and reclaim the family throne and had built his character around that idea of him being this very stoic warrior who was dedicated to restoring his family's honor. And in the third game, he got critted with an arrow by a bandit and died.
Yeah.
And he was dead.
And that's that.
And he re-rolled, but the player playing the second eldest, a ranger who was not a character intended to take the throne, who was a character designed to not really like and separate herself from that aspect of her family, to prefer to be in the wild, is now forced into the position of reclaiming the throne for her family. That's such a more interesting story than the guy who was supposed to do it, doing it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't intended by my part. That
That's
wasn't
the
going to be the
dice.
story at all.
Yeah.
But he died, and rather than try and fudge it and say, "Oh, you're at 0 hit points. Somebody stop the bleeding."
Yeah.
I do try and ask players. I will stop the game if I feel like it's coming, or I feel like maybe it would be an interesting point for it, even, and talk to them outside of it.
Well, that brings up kind of metagaming.
Yeah.
So how do you tolerate metagaming? How do you manage that as a DM? Maybe define metagaming too.
Yeah. Metagaming is when someone is making choices within the game based upon knowledge that they have as a player. That could mean a few things. That could mean using an understanding of the rules to make, I'm trying to think of a good example, because it's something that kind of everyone does to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So let's say you were playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons and you were moving through a graveyard and suddenly a dead body came out of one of the graves and started shambling towards you. Somebody might say, destroy the brain or remove the head, right? Everybody would at least use the word zombie to talk about it, even in character, but there might be no reason for them in character to know
Right.
what a zombie is. So that could be one edge of the scale of people just inadvertently including in the game things that they understand outside.
Yeah.
The other side of that can be much more annoying when it's something like, I heard the DM make a roll, and so I know that somebody's trying to sneak up on me.
Okay.
Or I have read the monster manual
Yeah.
about this type of monster that, all devils are vulnerable to silver. So since we're going to go fight a devil, everybody bring silver weapons.
Right.
Well, why do you know that? Because I've read the monster manual.
Yeah.
But your character hasn't read the monster manual. But because it's a spectrum, it can be hard to know exactly where to tell people, hey, focus it in. Part of that is to ask people for reasons why their character makes a decision. Just explicitly ask them
Why.
And, really, it could be any reason. If they could give you any reason why their character knows about silver weapons, that's probably enough to just keep moving forward. But if...
Just earn it a little bit.
Yeah, just at least try and work for it. It works with you too, because I, as a dungeon master, want the players to know that silver weapons harm devils. That's not really secret information, because the fight will be more interesting to them if they learn something like that first.
Yeah.
And so then they prepare in a specific way. And then when they fight the devil, he's all like, "Whoa, you cannot harm me." And then they stab him with the silver weapon.
Yeah.
How did you know that silver was the one thing that could pierce my skin?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're really trying to hold a lot of this back. If somebody is doing something at a very mechanical metagaming.
Right. I went and bought the adventure manual and read it myself.
Well, if they did that, I'd kick them out of their game. Or I say, okay, you're the DM now, and I'm going to become a player. So
we'll see how it feels in the shoes on the other foot.
It's you're the one in control. But one thing I see a lot of players do, and this goes more towards the harmless side of metagaming, but if you're fighting someone in Dungeons and Dragons, they have an armor class. You need to, it's a number. Your dice roll plus your modifier needs to meet or exceed that number. So let's say somebody rolls the die and they add their modifier and they got a 14 and the DM says, that doesn't hit. And then someone else rolls and they add their modifier and they got a 15 and the DM says, that hits. You now know that the AC is 15, which is a concept which does not exist within the game itself, which is metagame thinking. And people will be like, okay, its AC is 15. All right, we got that figured out. People write down AC 15. And
what can you really do with that information? You're still just rolling dice.
It can actually give them the ability to talk again outside of character and metagame situations, how they can guarantee to beat an AC 15 with certain rolls or things like that.
In my mind, that's kind of an earned.
Yeah,
that's earned.
And that's part of that is part of the fun. In the same way that I described, it's not bad for the players to know that silver hurts werewolves. Everybody who comes to the table knows that silver hurts werewolves. But I should include that then in the game and give their characters a reason to know things like that. And if people are doing stuff where they're trying to design strategies around things within the rules, I should look for opportunities to manifest those abstract rules in storytelling elements. Determining something's AC could be the same as finding a weak point, tearing off a piece of armor,
Yeah.
something like that. Getting a vision from a god telling you where you should shoot them or whatever.
It's Obi-Wan Kenobi telling you.
To the exhaust port or whatever.
Yeah. I wanted you to hear more about your 3-frame analysis. You talked about this before with me, and I find it very interesting. So maybe you could go over what those 3 frames are and how it applies.
It's been dancing around the edge of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is part of how I look at solving problems at the table. Frameworks are a sociological method where you're looking at a complex social situation and you try to develop, in some ways, a hierarchical layer of the different elements occurring. Some of the academics who have studied Dungeons and Dragons use 3 frames, and one way to describe them is a series of 3 sentences. I say, friend or foe. I make a charisma check. Pass me the potato chips. Those occur on 3 frames of reality. So down at the bottom, we have the story, which is being told. This is frame 3. This is the characters, what the characters are saying to one another. Moving up is the realm of the mechanical rules, which are being used in the game. This falls academically under ludology, the study of game systems. And this is a layer that mediates frame 3, the story, with frame 1, which is our common sense reality, the people at the table interacting with one another, the sociological aspect. That's frame 1. I find that this is very useful for a number of reasons. One is that there are so many elements happening when you're a dungeon master. You are trying to keep track of sociological, gameplay mechanics, and storytelling elements. And you're expected to be managing all of those things simultaneously.
And generally, you have to bring the food to the table, too.
I make them bring the food. I'm not bringing the food to the table. I tell people that they can pay me with peanut M&Ms and ginger ale. That's my usual reward for being a DM. Breaking it down with those 3 frames helps me see where the problem might be. Because I talked earlier about a situation where a character is acting in a game in a way that is disruptive to the people who are playing the game. And a lot of the times, right, you have that character and you think that character is the issue. And then a lot of the DMs will do things like try and address within the game, punishing problem players by imposing consequences on them, and the players getting upset about that. And that miscommunication is happening in frame 1. I talked about expectations for what gameplay will be like and things like that. Those are not storytelling elements. The storytelling elements in the game are all messed up because of the conflict that's happening on the highest level. It can go in different directions too. I talked about the need to have an ability to like stop the game at any point. Something can happen in the story that upsets somebody on level 1. Level 3 can cause a problem on level 1. And then people might try and convince the person to be okay with the thing in the story, try and solve the problem on level 1, but that's not where the problem is. The problem's in level 3, where the story has taken a turn that the other person doesn't want. And we got to fix the problem in level 3 by just rolling the story back and going a different direction and taking into account other people's needs. I've been at tables where I have said jokes that offended people and things like that, and always been able to just overcome it and get the storyline back on track by just taking that into account and not trying to take it personally, not trying to see it as an issue on level 1, trying to just let the story be the story. There can be problems where you feel like somebody at the table is frustrated. They might get angry at you as the DM because they don't understand the mechanics. And it might be an issue of you haven't taught them enough on the mechanics. It might just be an issue of the mechanics different games are better suited for different types of people. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses. And if you feel like every time you get a group together, then people play for 2 or 3 games and then they fall off. And you think, oh, am I not doing a good story on frame 3? Am I not a nice person on frame 1? Change the system and see if people are more interested in something that goes a different direction, just based off the things you've seen people play. Maybe just picking a game that's more social will cause issues in frame 1 to resolve themselves because people will begin acting more socially. So I guess that's primarily where my mind goes whenever I use it. When I encounter problems at the table, I try to think about where is the problem occurring and am I addressing the problem on that level? In some ways, this becomes one of the rules that makes improvisation easier. I've already set for myself certain steps to take when I encounter problems at the table. And that itself makes it easier to go to the table and to begin that process of being a dungeon master. There will always be learning, but you don't need to learn it all at the same time. Problems will happen pretty much in their own individual way. And it'll be a lot easier and you'll be a lot more successful if you don't try and be perfect at everything. Don't try and have the story be the thing that gets the players all the way motivated, when you might recognize that that's a frame 1 problem. And so you're just going to tell people what the game's going to be about and ask them to come up with motivation. And then no issues in frame 3 because frame 1 problems have been addressed in frame 1 and we're not jumping around.
Yeah, and then the frame 2 is set by the rule book, the mechanics of the game.
And as I said, that mediates the 2 frames. So if a player wants to do something, the mechanics are how they do it. And then if something happens, the mechanics are how you respond to the player. And that's necessary because there needs to be an element of randomness, because there needs to be the possibility of failure, or else a story's not interesting. Different games handle that to certain different degrees. There are like some games where everything has been calculated down to a percentage chance. There are some systems where the dungeon master has a lot more freedom to just make up their mind about what happens. But what the mechanics do is make things predictable for players and for the dungeon master. Players can say what it is they want to do with an understanding of what effect that might have in the world. If they know how making a stealth check works, then they can say to people, I want to make a stealth check. It also puts a barrier between the dungeon master and the players, which is nice. This is one of the reasons I encourage players to be superstitious about their die. And so if they roll die and they're getting a lot of really low numbers, I'll be like, no, that one doesn't like you, or it's bad today. And people pick that up and they get into
Put it in dice jail.
Yeah, they get a lucky die or something like that. That's because I want them to be mad at the die.
Yeah.
That they got eaten by the dragon, not me.
Yeah.
It's the dice. We'll blame the dice because I have to stand in their way and I have to stand against them or else there's no story. The mechanics give us something to focus on in that energy so that since that randomness should probably be an element of the game world and not just an element of our personalities and things, then that transitional frame helps us move back and forth without there being a lot of personality conflict, hopefully, because the rules are the same for everybody.
Well, and I think that's a perfect place to end it because next time we can talk about mechanics.
Yeah.
And what different mechanics are available and how you can use that to your advantage and fit it into the party. And there's a whole world out there ready for us to explore.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the DM Theory podcast. Next time, James and I are going to talk about the mechanics behind role-playing games, including how some games are better for certain groups, and shining some light on alternatives to Dungeons & Dragons. Thank you again for listening. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, please spay or neuter your pets. Until next time, pick up your dice, step up to the table, and good gaming.